The howling wind cut through the Colorado Rockies like a blade, carrying with it the promise of the worst blizzard Jake Morrison had seen in 15 years of ranching. Snow pelted against the windows of his weathered cabin as he pulled on his heavy coat, preparing for the evening check on his cattle. At 42, Jake had grown accustomed to the solitude of mountain life. It was a choice he'd made after losing his wife Sarah to cancer 5 years ago. The barn stood like a fortress against the storm, its wooden walls groaning under the assault of wind and ice. Jake pushed through the heavy doors, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The familiar scent of hay and leather greeted him, along with the soft lowing of his cattle seeking shelter. But something was different tonight. A soft whimper echoed from the far corner of the barn, barely audible above the storm's fury. Jake's hand instinctively moved to the rifle he always carried during winter nights. Mountain lions and bears weren't uncommon, especially when driven down by harsh weather. What he found instead stopped him cold. Huddled behind a stack of hay bales, wrapped in a torn and bloodied coat, was a young woman. Her dark hair was matted with snow and dirt, her face pale as moonlight. But what struck Jake most was her condition. She was heavily pregnant, her belly round and full beneath her inadequate clothing. "Ma'am?" Jake's voice was gentle as he approached, his rifle lowered. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, deep brown, filled with fear and confusion. She tried to speak, but only a raspy whisper emerged. "Please, don't hurt." "I'm not going to hurt you," Jake said, kneeling beside her. "My name's Jake Morrison. This is my ranch. You're safe now." He could see she was in bad shape, dehydrated, exhausted, and showing signs of hypothermia. Her lips were blue and she was shivering uncontrollably. Around her neck hung a small silver necklace with an angel pendant, the only clue to her identity. "What's your name?" Jake asked, but the woman just stared at him blankly, her brow furrowed in concentration. I don't," she stammered, her voice breaking. "I can't remember. I don't remember anything." Jake's heart clenched. Whatever had happened to this woman, it had been traumatic enough to steal her memories. He noticed the cuts on her hands, the bruises on her arms. She'd been running from something or someone. "Okay, that's okay," he said softly. "We'll figure it out. But right now I need to get you warm and safe. Can you walk?" She tried to stand but collapsed back against the hay, wincing in pain. Jake didn't hesitate. He scooped her up in his arms, surprised by how light she felt despite her pregnancy. She couldn't weigh more than 120 pounds. "The baby," she whispered, her hand protectively covering her belly. "The baby's going to be fine," Jake assured her, though he had no medical training beyond basic ranch first aid. "We're going to take care of both of you." The journey from the barn to the cabin was treacherous in the blizzard, but Jake's sure footing carried them safely across the snow-covered ground. Inside, he laid her gently on the couch near the fireplace, quickly stoking the flames to chase away the cold. As warmth began to fill the room, Jake got his first good look at the woman he'd rescued. She was beautiful, probably in her mid-20s, with delicate features and skin that suggested she hadn't always lived a hard life. Her clothes, though torn and dirty, were of good quality, not the attire of someone accustomed to sleeping rough. "What should I call you?" Jake asked as he brought her a cup of hot tea. She touched the angel pendant at her throat, her eyes distant. "Angel," she said quietly. I think someone used to call me Angel." "Angel it is then," Jake nodded. "Angel, I'm going to call Doc Peterson in town. He needs to check on you and the baby." Fear flashed across her face. "No. Please, no doctors. No one can know I'm here." The desperation in her voice gave Jake pause. "Angel, you need medical attention. You're pregnant and you've been through trauma?" "Please," she gripped his arm with surprising strength. "I don't know why, but I know I can't let anyone find me. Something terrible will happen if they do." Jake studied her face, seeing the genuine terror there. His instincts, honed by years of reading both animals and people, told him she was telling the truth. Whatever she was running from, it was real and dangerous. "All right," he said finally. "No doctors tonight. But if you or the baby show any signs of distress, I'm calling Doc Peterson whether you like it or not. Deal?" Relief flooded her features. "Deal." As the night wore on, Jake made Angel as comfortable as possible. He gave her his late wife's clothes to change into, prepared a simple meal of soup and bread, and set up the guest room with fresh linens. All the while, he found himself stealing glances at this mysterious woman who had literally blown into his life with the storm. There was something about her, a quiet strength beneath the vulnerability, a gentleness in the way she thanked him for every small kindness. When she'd noticed his old dog, Rusty, limping with arthritis, she'd immediately knelt to examine the animal's joints with practiced hands. "You know about animals?" Jake observed. Angel looked surprised by her own actions. Yes, I think I do. It feels familiar." As she settled into the guest room for the night, Angel turned to Jake with tears in her eyes. "Why are you helping me? You don't know anything about me. I could be dangerous." Jake considered her question seriously. "Maybe it's because I know what it's like to be lost," he said finally. "And maybe because I believe that sometimes people come into our lives exactly when we need them most." Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the cabin, two lost souls had found an unexpected shelter in each other's presence. 3 days had passed since the storm, and Angel was slowly regaining her strength. Jake watched her from the kitchen window as she moved carefully around the barn, her natural affinity with animals becoming more apparent each day. His horses, usually skittish around strangers, seemed drawn to her gentle touch. "She's got a gift," he murmured to himself, then froze as he spotted something that made his blood run cold. Tire tracks in the snow. Fresh ones, leading up to his property line before turning back toward town. Jake grabbed his coat and headed outside, his expression grim. Angel looked up as he approached, immediately sensing his tension. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Someone's been snooping around the property," Jake said, keeping his voice calm. "Could be nothing but—" Angel's face went pale. "They found me." "Who found you, Angel? You need to tell me what we're dealing with here." She pressed her hands to her temples, frustration evident in every line of her body. "I wish I could remember. There are pieces, flashes of images, voices, but nothing complete." Jake took her hands in his, steadying her. "Then tell me what you do remember. Even fragments might help." Angel closed her eyes, concentrating. There was a man, older, with gray hair and cold eyes. He was angry about something. And there was money, lots of money in briefcases. I think I saw something I wasn't supposed to see." "What about the baby's father?" Pain flickered across her features. "I remember loving someone. Someone with kind eyes and a gentle voice. But his face it's like looking through fog." Before Jake could respond, the sound of vehicles approaching made them both freeze. 2 black SUVs were making their way up the mountain road toward his ranch. "Get in the house," Jake ordered, his voice sharp with authority. "Stay away from the windows." Angel grabbed his arm. "Jake, if they're here for me, they'll have to go through me first," he said firmly. "Now go." Jake positioned himself on the front porch as the vehicles pulled into his yard. 4 men emerged, all wearing expensive suits that looked out of place in the rugged mountain setting. The leader, a man with silver hair and the cold eyes Angel had described, approached with a predatory smile. "Mr. Morrison, I presume? I'm Vincent Carrera. We're looking for someone. A young woman, pregnant, might have been injured. Have you seen anyone matching that description?" Jake's expression remained neutral. "Can't say that I have." "What's your interest in this woman?" "She's my daughter-in-law," Carrera lied smoothly. "She's been having some mental health issues. Delusions, paranoia. Her family is very worried about her and the baby." "If she's family, where are the police? Why aren't you working with the authorities?" Carrera's smile turned cold. "Sometimes family matters are best handled privately, Mr. Morrison. I'm sure you understand." Jake's hand rested casually near his sidearm. "I understand that you're trespassing on my property. And I understand that if this woman is as troubled as you say, she'd need medical attention, not a group of men in suits." The tension in the air was palpable. Carrera's men shifted restlessly, their hands moving toward concealed weapons. But Jake stood his ground, every inch the mountain man who'd faced down bears and mountain lions. "We'll be checking with the local authorities," Carrera said finally. "If you're hiding her, Mr. Morrison, you're putting yourself in considerable danger." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact." After the men left, Jake found Angel huddled in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. "I heard everything," she whispered. "He's not my family, Jake. I know that much. When I heard his voice, every instinct I have screamed danger." Jake pulled her into his arms, feeling her trembling against him. "We need to get you somewhere safe. I have friends in town." "No," Angel said firmly. "If he's willing to come here personally, he has resources. Money, connections. Nowhere in this area will be safe." "Then what do you suggest?" Angel looked up at him, her brown eyes filled with desperate determination. "Marry me." Jake stared at her in shock. "What?" "If I'm your wife, I have legal protection. Your name, your standing in the community. It would make it much harder for them to just make me disappear." Angel, that's crazy. We barely know each other. I know you're a good man, she interrupted. I know you've shown me more kindness in 3 days than I can remember receiving in however long I've been running. And I know that baby I'm carrying deserves a chance at life. Jake ran his hands through his hair, the weight of the decision crushing down on him. This isn't some game, Angel. If we do this, if I claim you as my wife, I'm declaring war on whoever's hunting you. I know what I'm asking, Angel said softly. And I know it's not fair. But Jake, I'm desperate. And I think maybe you're a little lost too. Her words hit closer to home than Jake cared to admit. Since Sarah's death, he'd been going through the motions of living without really being alive. This woman, this mysterious angel who'd appeared in his barn like a gift from the storm, had awakened something in him he'd thought was buried forever. If we do this, he said slowly, it's not just for show. I don't do anything halfway, Angel. If you become my wife, I'll protect you with my life. But I'll also expect honesty between us as much as you can manage. Angel nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I promise. Whatever I remember, whenever I remember it, I'll tell you everything. That evening, Jake made a phone call to Pastor Williams in town. Pastor, I need a favor. A big one. The next morning, in a simple ceremony witnessed only by the pastor and his wife, Jake Morrison married the woman he knew only as Angel. As they exchanged vows in his living room, with snow falling softly outside the windows, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was either making the best decision of his life or the most dangerous one. But when Angel smiled at him after he slipped Sarah's wedding ring onto her finger, Jake knew there was no turning back. For better or worse, Angel was now his wife, and he would move heaven and earth to protect her. What he didn't know was that their marriage certificate would be filed in the county records within hours, and that Vincent Carrera had people watching those records very carefully. 2 weeks into their marriage, Angel was beginning to feel like she might actually have a chance at a normal life. Her memory remained frustratingly fragmented, but living with Jake felt natural in a way that surprised them both. She'd taken over cooking duties, discovering an intuitive knowledge of herbs and healing remedies that proved invaluable on the ranch. Jake had been nothing but respectful, never pushing the boundaries of their arrangement despite the growing attraction neither could deny. They shared meals, worked side by side with the animals, and talked long into the evenings by the fireplace. Angel found herself falling for the quiet strength of this mountain man who'd given her his name and protection without asking for anything in return. But their fragile peace was shattered on a Tuesday morning when Angel's water broke 3 weeks early. Jake, she called out from the kitchen, panic in her voice as she felt the warm fluid running down her legs. Something's wrong. Jake rushed in from the barn to find Angel gripping the counter, her face contorted with pain. The baby's coming, she gasped. It's too early. Without hesitation, Jake scooped her up and carried her to his truck. We're going to the hospital in Denver. Doc Peterson's clinic isn't equipped for complications. No hospitals, Angel protested weakly. They'll find me. Angel, our baby could die, Jake said firmly, and the possessive way he said, our baby, sent warmth through her despite the pain. I won't let that happen. The drive down the mountain was harrowing, with Angel's contractions coming faster and stronger. Jake pushed his truck to its limits on the winding roads, one hand on the wheel and the other holding Angel's as she squeezed through each wave of pain. Tell me about Sarah, Angel said suddenly, trying to distract herself. Jake glanced at her in surprise. Why? Because I need to know about the woman whose ring I'm wearing. And because I love you, Jake Morrison, and I want to know all of you. Jake's heart stopped. In all their conversations, neither had spoken the word love, though it had been growing between them like a wildfire. She was sunshine, he said softly. Always laughing, always seeing the good in everything. She wanted children so badly, but the cancer took her before we could. She would have loved this baby, Angel said with certainty. And she would have loved that you're protecting us. They made it to Denver General just as Angel's contractions became unbearable. The medical team rushed her into delivery, and Jake found himself pacing the waiting room like an expectant father, which he realized he essentially was. Dr. Martinez emerged 3 hours later with a tired but genuine smile. Congratulations, Mr. Morrison. You have a healthy baby girl. 6 pounds 2 ounces. Both mother and baby are doing well. Jake's knees nearly buckled with relief. Can I see them? Of course. Room 314. Jake found Angel propped up in bed, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in pink blankets. The baby had Angel's dark hair and delicate features, but her eyes, when they fluttered open, were a startling blue. She's beautiful, Jake whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Would you like to hold your daughter? Angel asked, and Jake's heart swelled at the word daughter. As Jake carefully took the baby in his arms, Angel watched his face transform with wonder and love. This gruff mountain man who'd lived alone for so long was completely enchanted by the tiny life in his arms. What should we name her? Jake asked. Hope, Angel said without hesitation. Her name is Hope Morrison. But their moment of joy was interrupted by a commotion in the hallway. Through the partially open door, Jake could see hospital security talking urgently with someone out of sight. His blood ran cold when he heard a familiar voice. I have reason to believe she's here. A young woman just gave birth, probably using a false name. Vincent Carrera. Jake quickly handed Hope back to Angel and moved to the door. We need to go. Now. I can't travel yet. Angel, he's here. In this hospital. Fear flooded Angel's face, but before she could respond, her expression suddenly changed. Her eyes went wide and she gasped as if struck by lightning. Maria, she whispered. My name is Maria Elena Vasquez. I remember. The memories came flooding back like a dam bursting. She was an undercover DEA agent who'd infiltrated Carrera's organization. She'd discovered he was using pregnant women as drug mules, forcing them to swallow balloons of heroin before crossing the border. When she tried to gather evidence, her cover was blown. The father of my baby, she continued, tears streaming down her face. Agent David Chin. He was my partner, my fiancé. Carrera killed him when he tried to help me escape. Jake felt like he'd been punched in the gut. The woman he'd fallen in love with, married, and just watched give birth to their daughter was a federal agent. Everything he thought he knew was a lie. But as he looked at Angel, Maria, holding their baby, he realized it didn't matter. Whatever her real name, whatever her past, she was his wife now. Hope was his daughter. And Vincent Carrera was about to learn what happened to people who threatened Jake Morrison's family. There's a service elevator at the end of the hall, Jake said, his voice deadly calm. Can you walk? Maria nodded, though she was clearly in pain. Jake helped her into a wheelchair, carefully placed Hope in her arms, and began pushing them toward the elevator. They could hear Carrera's voice getting closer, more insistent. As the elevator doors closed, Jake made a decision that would change everything. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he'd memorized years ago but never used. Agent Sarah Morrison, DA, came the voice on the other end. Sarah, it's Jake. I need help. And before you ask, yes, this is about the sister-in-law you thought was dead. The woman on the phone, Jake's late wife's sister, who'd taken her name when she joined the DA, was silent for a long moment. Jake, what have you gotten yourself into? I'll explain everything. But right now, I have an undercover agent and her newborn baby, and Vincent Carrera is hunting them. We need extraction and we need it now. As the elevator descended toward the parking garage, Jake looked at his wife and daughter and made a silent promise. Whatever it took, whoever he had to fight, his family would survive this. The cowboy from the mountain had found his purpose again, and heaven help anyone who tried to take it away from him. The safe house in the Colorado wilderness was a far cry from Jake's ranch, but it served its purpose. For 3 weeks, they'd been hidden away while the DA built their case against Vincent Carrera using Maria's testimony and the evidence she'd gathered during her undercover operation. Jake sat on the porch, watching Maria nurse baby Hope in the morning sunlight. The truth about her identity had been a shock, but it had also explained so much. Her knowledge of animals came from growing up on her grandfather's ranch in Texas. Her instincts about danger were honed by years of law enforcement training, and her courage in the face of impossible odds was simply who she was. Penny for your thoughts, Maria said, settling beside him with Hope sleeping peacefully in her arms. Just thinking about how different things could have been, Jake admitted. If that storm hadn't blown you into my barn, if I'd turned you away. But you didn't, Maria said softly. You saved us, Jake. Both of us. Agent Sarah Morrison emerged from the house, her phone in hand and a satisfied expression on her face. It's over, she announced. Carrera and his entire organization have been arrested. The evidence Maria gathered, combined with what we found in his compounds, will put him away for life. Relief flooded through Jake, but it was tempered by uncertainty. So what happens now? Sarah looked between her brother-in-law and the woman who'd become like a sister to her over the past weeks. That's up to you two. Maria, the DA wants you back. You're a decorated agent, and after what you've been through, you can write your own ticket. Maria was quiet for a long moment, looking down at Hope's peaceful face. And if I choose not to go back? Then you don't, Sarah said simply. You've given enough, Maria. More than enough. That evening, as they sat by the fireplace in the safe house, Maria finally voiced what had been weighing on her heart. Jake, I need you to know that everything between us, it wasn't part of some cover story. When I lost my memory, when I became Angel, I fell in love with you as myself. The real me. Jake took her hand, his thumb tracing over the wedding ring that had belonged to his first wife. I know. And I need you to know that when I married you, when I claimed Hope as my daughter, I meant every word. Memory or no memory, DA agent or not, you're my wife. But what about your ranch? Your life in the mountains? I can't ask you to give that up. Jake smiled, the first truly relaxed smile Maria had seen from him in weeks. Who says I'm giving it up? Hope's going to need wide open spaces to grow up in. And I think her mother might like the peace and quiet after years of undercover work. Maria's eyes filled with tears. Are you sure? Really sure? Because once we go back to that mountain, I'm never leaving again. You'll be stuck with a former federal agent and her baby. Our baby, Jake corrected firmly. And I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be stuck. 3 months later, they stood in the same living room where they'd first exchanged vows, this time with Pastor Williams performing a renewal ceremony. Maria wore Sarah's wedding dress, carefully altered to fit, and Hope gurgled happily in the arms of her honorary Aunt Sarah. The small gathering included Doc Peterson, who'd become Hope's unofficial grandfather, several neighboring ranchers who'd welcomed Maria into their tight-knit community, and even Agent Chen's parents, who'd flown in from California to meet the woman their son had loved and the baby who carried his legacy. Do you, Jake Morrison, take Maria Elena Vasquez to be your wife, to love and cherish, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, for as long as you both shall live? I do, Jake said, his voice strong and sure. And do you, Maria Elena Vasquez, take Jake Morrison to be your husband, to love and cherish, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, for as long as you both shall live? Maria looked into the eyes of the man who'd saved her life, given her his name and loved her daughter as his own. I do. As they kissed to seal their vows, Hope let out a delighted squeal that made everyone laugh. Outside, snow was beginning to fall on the Rocky Mountains, but inside the cabin, warmth and love filled every corner. Later that evening, as they tucked Hope into her crib, the same one Jake had built for the children he'd hoped to have with his first wife, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd never lost my memory? She asked Jake as they stood watching their daughter sleep. Jake considered the question seriously. I think we would have found each other eventually, he said. Maybe not in a barn during a blizzard, but somehow. Some people are just meant to be together. Maria leaned into his embrace, feeling truly safe for the first time in years. I love you, Jake Morrison. I love you too, Maria Morrison, he replied, and the name sounded perfect on his lips. Outside, the wind howled through the mountains, but it no longer sounded lonely to Jake. His barn was full of healthy animals, his house was full of love and laughter, and his heart was full of hope for the future. The cowboy from the mountain had found his family in the most unexpected way, and as he held his wife and watched over their sleeping daughter, Jake knew that sometimes the best things in life really did come from the storm. In the distance, a coyote howled at the moon and Jake smiled. Even the wild things of the mountain were singing tonight, celebrating the love that had bloomed in the wilderness and the hope that would carry them all into tomorrow.